girl, or should I say, she once had me. She showed me a room, isn't it good, Norwegian wood. Norwegian Wood by the Beatles. That's in Mixolydian Mode. Now we're going to take a look at the modes for the second time in a different way this time, from bright to dark. You might want to watch the first in this series on modes about how to find them on the guitar neck in case you haven't. In the first video we looked at the modes starting on different degrees of the major scale. Starting on the first degree in the key of C is the major scale or Ionian mode. The second degree, Dorian mode. The third degree, Phrygian mode, etc. That's an interesting way to look at the modes, but it's not the way that I normally think of the modes. In this video we're going to look at the modes all in the key of C. You can find a companion PDF on my website, Dave's Guitar Planet. It's called The Modes Bright to Dark. Go into the PDF section there. And I'm going to use the piano keyboard, do a screencast like last time, because it's easiest to see music theory on a piano keyboard. At the end of this video I'll have maybe a little surprise for you. At least it was a surprise for me when I was learning about the modes from bright to dark many years ago. Let's take a look at the piano first. Major scale or Ionian mode in the key of C. Again, all the white notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Or in music theory, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hard to imagine a brighter, happier sounding scale. This time we're also going to look at some of the chords associated with the modes. You might know that if I make a chord playing every other note, the root of the chord, the third, and the fifth, that makes a major chord in the key of C here. C, E, G. So this distance or interval from 1 to 3 we call a major third, because it's starting from 1 in a major scale. In music theory we relate everything back to the major scale. So if I take this major third and I lower it by a half step, now that's what we call a minor third. If you make a chord with a minor third, the mood completely changes. Now it's got a sad or dark sound. But the major scale or Ionian mode, of course, has the bright, happy third in it. Probably the two most important notes in a scale are the third note, or the third, and the 7. Here's the 7th note of the major scale, just a half step below the root, 8. So this 7 is again a bright, happy, or even pretty sounding 7. If we play a chord with this 7, we call that the major 7 because it's from the major scale. Has a very pretty sound. If you take the major 7 and you flat it, take it down a half step to this B flat, that's what we call the flat 7. So there's a dominant 7 chord, much funkier, bluesier sound. Anyway, the Ionian, the 1 chord is major, the 2 chord is minor. We build a chord off the 2nd note of the scale. The 3rd chord is also minor. Now the 4 chord is major because from here to here is 2 whole steps. That's a major third. The next chord, G major, is a major chord. Next chord, A minor, minor chord. Now the next chord is the one wild card chord, the odd man out. It's a diminished chord. Those are 2 minor thirds, so that's what defines a diminished chord. This interval is a flat 5. If I raise it, this is your regular 5th. We call a perfect 5th usually. Usually we don't mess with the 5th. When we do, we really change the nature of a chord. So the 1 chord and the 4 chord and the 5 chord are major chords. So many songs we call these the primary chords, and they're all major chords, so very bright and happy sounding. Okay, that's the Ionian mode. Everything else relates to the major scale or Ionian mode. Let's go back to the guitar. And if you remember from the previous video, what I call the formula in whole steps and half steps, the major scale is from the root. I'm on the 8th fret of the E string with my 2nd finger. From the root, we go a whole step, another whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and half step. 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step. The half steps are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. And that's what defines the major scale or Ionian mode. On the piano, I showed you how to play what's called the diatonic chords. Down here on the 3rd fret, many people play it like this. I find it more comfortable to play with my little finger like Eric Clapton does. That's a C major. The 2 chord on the 5th fret is D minor. The 3 chord on the 7th fret is E minor. The 4 chord on the 8th fret is F major. The 5 chord is G major. Now my first finger's on the 10th fret. The 6th chord is A minor. Now I'm up on the 12th fret with my first finger. And the oddball chord, the diminished chord, I got my 2nd finger on the 14th fret. The finger numbers would be 2nd finger 14, 3rd finger 15th fret D string, 1st finger 13th fret G string, little finger 15th fret B string. One way to play a diminished chord. And then back to the tonic chord, way up here. First finger on the 15th fret. Could play it like this. A little bit difficult. We call that the diatonic series. And probably half of all the songs that you hear on the radio are in the major scale or Ionian mode. So very bright and happy. If you play the 1, 4, 5 chords, you can play them in the open position chords, the campfire chords. C, F, G. So many songs just with those 3 chords. Bright and happy. Okay, let's take a look at the next mode, the Mixolydian mode. We just reviewed the major scale. Hard to imagine any mode that's brighter or happier than that. If we make one change to that scale, it changes the character or the flavor or the personality of it a little bit. Now instead of a pretty major 7 chord, take the 7 and drop it down a half step to B flat. That's a flat 7, a little bit funkier, bluesier sounding. That's Mixolydian Mode. If you remember from the last video, Mixolydian Mode is the one that starts on the 5th degree of a major scale. Again, sounds just like the major scale, but the major scale would have this pretty major 7 in it. But Mixolydian Mode has a flat 7 in it there. Otherwise, it's exactly like the major scale. So if we go back to C and play Mixolydian Mode, exactly the major scale with just one change. Instead of the major 7, we've got the flat 7. I started out the video playing a little bit of Norwegian Wood by the Beatles. It's written, the first part of it is written in Mixolydian Mode. Of course, the Beatles probably didn't think about that when they were writing it. They just made a cool sounding song. It turned out that instead of having the pretty major 7, they used the flat 7, which is just a teeny bit darker sounding. You'll notice that, again, the bright, happy mode that we start with starts on C. This next one, it's just a tad darker, or not quite as bright and happy, is derived from G. That's up a 5th. We'll find that the next darkest mode is going to be up a 5th from G to D. Remember that the primary chords in Ionian or major scale were major, major, major. So if we play the primary Mixolydian chords in C, we've got major, major, but now minor, because we've got this B flat. The flat 7. I think Louie Louie, the 5 chord, is minor. I might be wrong about that, but I think it is. So you could say Louie Louie is in Mixolydian. Okay, let's look at it on the guitar. To play Mixolydian Mode on the guitar, we just have to change one note from the major scale. Instead of a major 7, we're going to make it a flat 7. So it sounds like this. Just a teeny bit darker sounding than the major scale, and that would be the 7 that would be in a dominant 7 chord. If you play the major 7, we can play a major 7 chord like that. That'd be the pretty sounding one. If you want to play a major 7, you can put in C here, 3rd finger on the 9th fret of the D string, little finger 9th fret G string, 2nd finger 8th fret B string. If you just look at that shape, it looks like a minor chord, similar to the A minor shape down here. And then you just flop your 1st finger kind of at an angle over to the root on the 8th fret. A major 7 chord. The intervals are 1, major 7, major 3rd, 5. So if we take this major 7 down a half step, now we can finger it like this. We get the funky bluesy 7 there. It's fun to improvise using the Mixolydian scale. Major scale is alright, but sometimes I get a little bit bored with it because it's so pretty and sanitary. Has the pretty major 7, so I find it a little bit boring, a little bit too white bread or something. So just by changing that one note, major 7 to flat 7, gets a lot funkier. Doing a little passing tone. There's the flat 7. And now we're going to go into the minor modes. If you remember the one that started on D, that's Dorian.